Lovitz.
On the game, PlayStation game. What we always call? Heads or tails on the PlayStation. It's call on the game, PlayStation game. What we always call? Heads or tails on the PlayStation game. All right then. You're supposed to call tails. You're supposed to call tails. You're supposed to call tails. PlayStation and never fail.
Yes. Great question, Josh. A couple of points about this. Number one, in terms of the published work itself, so like a movie or a TV series that's been released publicly, there is nothing that would prevent them from doing that, just like there is nothing that would prevent any third-party company that has access to that material from doing that as well. As you might know, there's ongoing litigation right now over the fact that a number of AI companies have actually ingested material, copyrighted material, without getting any kind of authorization from the copyright owners, and use that to train AI systems. And it is as yet an unanswered legal question as to whether or not that is going to be viewed by the courts as a copyright infringement and something that's legally protectable or not. So there's nothing that would stop those companies from doing that, or these companies from doing that, except for the efforts that we're making in public policy space to provide additional protections, such as the No Fakes Act that we're pursuing in Congress, such as legislation we've got in the California legislature attempting to address proper consent for the use of AI systems. So there are a number of public policy efforts that are going on to try and corral that in a bigger picture way, but that's something that falls outside the scope of the contract.
The Center for Culture and Technology, University of Toronto. We joined the group listening to a tape of a Gould performance of Mozart's Sonata K311 in D major. Tonight's guest is Jeffrey Pesant, a philosophy teacher, musician, and author of a recent book on pianist Glenn Gould. This is one of hundreds of seminars Professor McLuhan has held over the years. The style has always been a reflection of the man, wide open and wide-ranging. The following is an edited version of the proceedings. Professor Jeffrey Pesant.
Well, you may find lots of things wrong with that. But I think when you listen to it, you'll hear what I hear. You hear one single mighty charge of nervous and intellectual energy, however you may want to define those. A unifying intelligence, joining all those somewhat exaggerated pauses in some instances. And nobody else could slow down those little recitativo bits that slowed down as much as they did in this, and make it yet hang together. He was being very naughty with that kind of thing.
A musical performer is manipulating an audience very, very considerably, isn't he? As much as any advertising man, a musical performer manipulates his public.
What I'm trying to do is set you up. And what I'm trying to set you up for is the announcement that it has 34 splices. What you just heard has 34 splices in it. And that's an awful lot of splices. And there are bits and pieces in there from over a dozen different performances or takes of the same piece. And in some cases, it may well be that one of the statements of the rondo was lifted, or as they say, regenerated from an earlier statement of the rondo. Same one put down later. Some of those dramatic pauses where you can just imagine the pianist milking the silence in an auditorium, you know, the sort of thing that pianists do, and then plunging in. Those were achieved with a razor blade.
There is nothing exactly novel about this splicing process or editing.
AI Act in Europe has some very good provisions. The banning of emotion recognition, which is a pseudo-scientific type of use of AI technology that claims to be able to determine people's feelings and character and interior states by looking at their face.
Telling us we're going down a road, and in 2.5 years there'll be a new contract, and maybe the companies will get more in terms of AI. What should we do as consumers? What can I do? I've got power because I spend my money on streaming and videos.
depends on what you want. I mean, soon they'll have... synthetic performer, which is an AI object that resembles a human.
What I'm trying to do is set you up. And what I'm trying to set you up for is the announcement that it has 34 splices. What you just heard has 34 splices in it.
You feed it 100 years of performances. And that is one of the things that apparently, based on what documents say,
we have informed consent, and fair compensation for the creation and use of digital replicas of our members, whether living or deceased, whether created on set or licensed from a third party for use. We have increases to the benefit plan contribution caps for episodic work that we expect to generate more than $180 million additional dollars to the benefit plans over the term of this contract.
But Justina Budman, an L advisor for SAG, is being hypercritical of this deal, and she's not wrong. People are allowed to be grateful for the work put into it while still feeling anger and frustration that this is what we're being presented with. Using guilt tactics as a thought-stopping technique isn't serving anyone, because, if you read into what this deal proposes, you should be angry. Anjay, an incredibly rational response to it. Reply Hyde replies Heather Ashley T2H at Austin. This reply.
Offizial Frandrischer und 1H.
Austin, what makes you so sure she's not wrong? She's referencing an older point of the negotiation, which in itself is a breach of confidentiality, but more important, the final pieces for Al came through the eve of November 7th, of which she was not privy and knows nothing about. You deserve to have correct information and not assumptions from outdated material. Take your time learning the facts and then make an informed decision.
Hi there, this is Fran Drescher, your SAG-AFTRA National President. Later today, members will be receiving a detailed summary of the contract. We will also send out the things we did not get from the interim agreement,
which is replicating race science and physiognomy. It's very embarrassing, right? But it's also very dangerous. So there are provisions already in, a legislative form that would help here. I also think we need social movements. We need to make it easier for those in power to do the right thing than it is to listen to big tech lobbyists.
And Meredith, just recently there was a big summit in the UK, the UK AI Safety Summit. There were global leaders there. China was present as well, and I guess the view was to really try to have a conversation, get started on the risks AI poses and what to kind of do with that. The world wants to move towards a global consensus around the risks around AI and perhaps how to move forward in terms of rules, etc. But is that possible? There's a competition right now being played out in the tech sphere between the US, between China and other countries as well. Is it possible the world comes to some sort of global consensus?
Well, we cannot claim that a large number of big tech CEOs and a handful of world leaders and a scant number of civil society participants represent the world. We can't claim that a handful of global leaders represent the world. I think we need to be very precise in whose interests we are discussing when we talk about these consensus processes, because of course technical standards at some point will be developed, interoperability standards, there will be different thresholds, there will be export controls, there will be the frameworks put in place that protect governments and protect commerce and protect the confidentiality of information shared between powerful organizations and individuals. Power finds a way. But I think what we need to be more concerned around is that the illusion or the naming of those processes as a world consensus, as a global consensus, leaves out the fact that there are workers, there are people who will be subject to AI, there are those who will have to interact with these systems as part of getting benefits or interacting with government institutions, who should also have a say in this consensus. And that oftentimes the voices that are most necessary, those who bear the brunt of the errors and harms of these systems, who bear the brunt of the capabilities for social control and surveillance encoded in these systems, are not part of that consensus, have never consented to the application of these technologies, and have very little agency to push back on those harms and those misuses.
And we are putting together all the things that the AMPTP did not get as well, so that SAG-AFTRA members can attend tomorrow's webinar and be informed of this contract. But I implore you to put your faith in those that served and sacrificed on your behalf and were in the trenches each and every day. I can coexist with naysayers.
Because you haven't seen the full agreement yet. That is the union's just given them permission to replace actors
who are not in service to the union nor a part of the negotiating committee.
But I'm not here to debate this bullshit.
But do not overestimate their value while sitting on the sidelines.
With synthetic performers, which is an amalgamation of 100 years of performances. And that means fewer to no sets.
Every living room quarterback believes they could have won the Super Bowl, but there's only one Tom Brady throwing the football and only one SAG-AFTRA negotiating committee fighting for you. Thank you, and be well, to be continued.
There is nothing exactly novel about this splicing process or editing of subjects, things that are being performed and being presented. It's familiar in the movies. No movie is ever shot in a single dynamic unity, and certainly no newspaper is put together that way. But none of the things that we're accustomed to dealing with, I should think, in our information age are lacking that splice quality. So I think it's a norm, the mosaic pattern, collage, mosaic, to create a simultaneous whole by means of fragmentation and editing is normal.
There are many musicians who say no, and they won't release a recording that was not a straight-through take of the movement.
Now, just a moment. I thought that this is the latest, the direct disc.
Leaving aside direct-to-disc, there are musicians recording on tape who will not release an edited version. And there are certainly lots of people, working musicians, who think that is the norm.
What about symphonies, though? For a long time they've been editing, haven't they, and taping?
Well, all kinds of cheating of this order have been going on since the 1930s. In the old 78 RPM days.
No.
If there was a piece of movement in ternary form, sort of A, B, A, a da capo or aria or something where there was a first part and then a middle part that was different and then a third part that was the first part all over again, they would record that on two sides. They would record A, say it was in the order of 4 minutes and 20 seconds, which was what you could get on a 78 RPM 12-inch disc. And then B would be on the second side, and then it would say, turn disc over again and play side one. Yes, that sort of thing's gone on, but it's always been thought to be a cheat.
The new art business is making genuine fakes, and Glenn Gould is one of the great artists.
Clifford Irving was going to create a character called Howard Hughes.
Exactly. That's another way of going about it, and I think that this can be done very deliberately, and what we're talking about is the oral mode, or if you like, or
the paradoxical thing is that we have returned to the oral mode by means of engineering.
Exactly.
Electronic engineering has suddenly flipped us back into the ancient pre-literate mode of experience.
Well, do you think a spliced-up Gould disc is in the oral mode?
The effect is.
Aside from the fact that he's all the time mumbling and singing when he records.
No, the effect is.
The effect is, and it's Glenn Gould who's in charge, notice, of the remake. That is, he's using replays, and using replays of replays in order to make a new form of art, which we translate then into the old logical, sequential, compositional terms.
You guys aren't just preaching to the converted, you're preaching to the preacher.
We're not preaching. We're not preaching. We're commenting. We're just commenting.
We're replaying.
I seem to recall somewhere along the line that Glenn Gould decided to leave the concert stage and go to the studio. And I assume that this has something to do with what has happened in this recording here, that at one point he decided that the live audience was not the thing for him, and then somehow or other perfection, I don't know what his reason for this is, but perhaps you can answer that. Is this something to do with posterity, the perfection?
Not at all. Gould definitely does not record for posterity. He has no notion of producing definitive recordings. He does not believe there can be such a thing. And theoretically, he's on very strong ground.
We're now talking somewhat, we're talking more or less on the assumptions of Orpheus. And Murray Schafer has issued a manifesto to call for another Orpheus, generative artificial intelligence. It's a misnomer, it's just network tape splicing. In the electronic age, it is no longer a mythic dream. The possibility of tuning or programming the entire universe is back. It is here. We can do it. And I mean, physically it's possible. But it doesn't mean it's practical or going to.
Basis, and can you, and how do you let it go?
Well, most of my guests are not on the show to make news. They're on to explain the news, to help understand the news. So there's no game plan there. They're not trying to find that. What you do is those people. What you do is, well, here's my technique, and in 40 years, I've never been called on it. I interview at length, and then I edit. And I make sure that we, in the editing, get to the essence of what that person really wanted to say. It's a matter of judgment. But in 40 years, I've never had anybody come back and say, you took me out of context, or you didn't get to the essence of it. They actually are thankful that we have listened in a way that is beyond the words and then edited what is their view of what they would have said if they were as good at it as we are at it. You know what I mean? You listen. Look, I'm not saying you are. You listen for the meaning. You listen for the meaning, not necessarily for the words.
You said it beautifully, and I really appreciate it. That's the other thing I should write down. Edit to not take out of context. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, John.
Really. Thank you. You said it beautifully.
You know what I mean? We haven't wanted to say it. It's a matter of judgment. But in 40 years, I've never had anybody come back and say, you took me out of context, or you didn't get to the essence of it. They actually are thankful that we have listened in a way that is beyond the words and then edited what is their view of what they would have said if they were as good at it as we are at it. You know what I mean? Listened in a way that is beyond the words and then, and in 40 years, I've never... What you do is well, here's my technique, and in 40 years, I've never been called on it. I interview at length, and then I edit. And I make sure that we, in the editing, get to the essence of what that person really wanted to say. It's a matter of judgment. But in 40 years, I've never had anybody come back and say, you took me out of context, or you didn't get to the essence of it. They actually are thankful that we have listened in a way that is beyond the words and then edited what is their view of what they would have said if they were as good at it as we are now. You know what I mean? You listen. Look, I'm not saying you listen for the meaning. You listen of what they would have said if they were as good at it as we are now. You know what I mean? You listen.
Green Bay has won the toss and will receive. Good luck, man.
That's what I told you.
No, the special team always pick.
You should have told him tails.
I thought you told him.
No, I told you.
I thought you knew the special team always coach.
They don't play the PlayStation like us.
Yeah, I just on 160 at the head of this chapter, you quote McLuhan and Barry from Take Today, page 11. It is man who has become both figure and ground by the electrotechnical extension of his awareness. I just want to point out that at least since Plato, so 2,500 years ago, The problem of trying to talk about human awareness is that any kind of talk, any kind of writing directed to that problem, of course, is itself human awareness. And up until the present time, no one has figured out how to get out of that magic circle. And I just want to suggest that everything in this chapter and in the Tech Body chapter to follow, one of the contexts that we need to understand this stuff within is this circle